I love buying real estate. There's a lot of excitement about it. And I think, and it's really cool to say, look, I have these many doors. And also the cash flow is cool, is every month you can see that money. And in a way, it's like buying dividend stocks because those are paying out every month. And real estate is definitely a mixed bag from like the landlord perspective in a way, because there's a lot of human factors.
Hi, Laina. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Mark.
Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. Now, as a real estate investor, a personal finance teacher, and trainer on YouTube, what does peak performance mean to you?
For me, personally, as an entrepreneur, it's been a journey for me about how I structure my days and all that, but it's really about helping other people and helping them understand their money and have peak performance with their situation and their life, not someone else's life.
What does peak performance mean to you, though? What does that mean?
It means being at the top of your game and performing to the best of your abilities. So, part of what I do is I help people perform to the best of their abilities with their money.
Obviously, like everybody wants to be at the top of their game, right? But it's a thing that's so much easier said than done. So what are some things that you do in your own life and you help your clients do as well to make sure that they're actually doing it as opposed to just talking about it?
Yeah, there's a definitely an accountability piece here, I would say, because when I'm talking to my clients, a lot of the things that are missing is the fact that they lack that accountability. No one's asking if they did it. And then it's so easy to get off track that way because you haven't been, no one's checking in with you and being like, did you actually do that? And I think that's been helpful for me personally, is having people hold me accountable, but it's also a great way to see progress with other people.
Now, it's always wonderful if someone is in your life who checks up on you, who makes sure you're getting the things done to have that accountability. But not everybody has that. So, someone who's listening to this and they're like, I don't have that person that cares about me that much, that checks in on me on my progress all the time. What would you tell them to do?
I definitely tell them to take it one step at a time. And that's like part of my framework that I work with clients on, is that we need to take one step at a time so we can actually accomplish it. And then we need to have deadlines, like those SMART goals that they always talk about. Is we need to have a timely goal. And part of that is that we have a deadline for everything that we're accomplishing. And you can do that on your own. Yes, it's harder, but it is nice to have a spouse or a friend being like, how are you doing with your goals there? But yes, if you can take each step one at a time and have a deadline, that really helps.
How did your personal journey with money and finance begin?
What, growing up, I grew up in a super frugal family, and there was definitely a lot of guilt around money and spending and a lot of secrecy. Like we weren't really talking about it. And I definitely think this was true for a lot of people. And I wanted that to not be true. And I wanted to be part of the solution. And I wanted to open the doors to talking about money, to not feeling guilty about money, to not feeling like you're like some sort of burden because you cost money. And then I also saw a lot of pain around money with friends and families and single moms trying to figure out how to pay the power bill for the first time. And I'm like, I have to do something about this. And so that's part of what inspired me to start this journey.
Were you always good with money growing up?
This is all a bunch of trial and error, really. Like I was telling people at the session I was doing yesterday, is like the things that I have created to help with budgeting, like my circle chart and stuff. I created them out of necessity for myself because I have to figure out how to solve my own problems, basically. So in solving my own problems, then I get to share with other people. So it's not I had it all together. I did all the classic things, bought the overpriced car on emotional whim, and then we spent more money fixing that car than the car was worth. It was a whole mess.
What was one early money mistake that sticks out in your mind that like teach a major lesson?
Definitely that car, because so we were on a camping trip and we were in my husband's old car, and all our camping stuff was in the back, but this car couldn't handle it because it was too much weight, because it's such a sad little car. And so the wheels were scraping the wheel well and the rubber was burning. And I was like, I'm over this. We are buying a new car right now. And we went and made an emotional, quick purchase without thinking about it. And we got a big loan on it. And we didn't take it to be inspected. Yeah, that was definitely one that sticks out to me for sure.
How did that car come back to bite you after you bought it?
It was a Subaru, and so it always has transmission issues. So we spent thousands and thousands of dollars fixing it so that we could use it. And then we spent as much repairing it as we spent on the car. And there were so many more issues with the car because we weren't being careful about the purchase and we didn't have it inspected or anything like that. So it spent all its time in the shop and we spent all our money on it. And then we still had this loan on it. And then I got pregnant with our first baby and we got the car seat out and put it in the back. And we were like, this is not fitting. So then we had to buy a different car.
Wow. What's the first step you recommend for someone who feels totally overwhelmed by their finances?
Tracking. I would definitely think about just tracking and try to be judgment free about it, honestly, because there's so much judgment and guilt and shame around money. But what we need to know is where is your money actually going? And when I do this exercise with people, it's amazing the things that they come up with. And they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I was spending money on that. So just the simple act of figuring out where is my money going is the most important first step.
It's a common budgeting mistake people make that they don't realize they're making.
There's quite a few. How long do you want? An hour? But I think definitely something is forgetting about small purchases or impulse purchases. So they say that Americans spend like $314 a month on unnecessary impulsive purchases. That's the Target run that you went to buy milk and then you picked up a bunch of other things and then they forget to track it. And then before you know it, hundreds of extra dollars have been spent. And then they're like, why am I not making any progress? I never seem to have any extra money. And it often gets thrown away in that way. That's just one.
So, how does someone go about building a budget that actually works for them?
Like I was saying, that first step is tracking. So we got to figure out where the heck the money is going. And then we have to start making categories that make sense. So I normally divide things into two categories like fixed expenses and variable expenses. So your fixed expenses are like mortgage, insurance, car payment, all those things. And then the variable, like your food budget, your health budget. And then you need to make like goals. I'm going to spend $1,000 on food. And then every time you make a purchase, you need to notate that you spent that money on food and then know your running total so you know how much is left. And then you can start to see and start adjusting your the flow of that. So the next month you can be like, I need to mess with these numbers. I need to call my insurance guy and get this lowered, stuff like that.
There are not a lot of people who go around life having no stress with money. Money stress is probably just as rampant, just as health stress. But why do you think people avoid dealing with their finances, even though they know they need to?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And there's a ton of research about the stress, the money stress. And I think a lot of this, even for me too, is this we didn't grow up talking about money. And money was like, we're not going to talk about how much money we make. We're not going to talk about how much money we spend. Don't tell your friends what kind of house we live in. I definitely think it stemmed from our childhood of money is something we are not talking openly about. And then suddenly you're an adult and you don't know anything about money. You don't know how to manage money. You didn't learn about money in school. And here you are supposed to be knowing what you're doing and you don't. And so, yeah, it's just a long train of guilt and hiding and shame around the topic.
You mentioned that so many of us didn't grow up in an environment where we're taught about money, and the relationship that we have to money is also muddled, right? So, how can someone build a positive relationship with money if they grew up seeing it as a source of stress?
Yeah. So, one thing that's really helped for me in changing that mindset a little bit is we have a set amount of money that we get to spend on fun money, we call it. So I get fun money, my husband gets fun money, and then we have to spend it on fun things. We can't spend it on groceries. We have to spend it on things that we love and are just for fun. And that has really helped me be like, okay, I'm still within the bounds of our budget, within the bounds of our spending, but I get to buy what I want and I do not get to feel guilty about it either. Like that needs to be one of the rules. And this has taken a lot of time and I'm still a work in progress, but it means I can be like, yes, I do have the money for that to do this fun thing and I'm going to do it and just have the fun. And that's the only emotion around this purchase that I'm allowed to have, which is so different between do I have enough? I think people think that a budget is so limiting, but it's really about the freedom to be like, yeah, I do have the money to buy this. I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm not going to justify this. I don't need to ask someone about whether or not I can afford it, that sort of thing.
When you have this allotment of money that is allowed for fun and not allowed for fun, how does the role, like, how does self-worth play a role in this? Because sometimes we might want something and we can't have it, and maybe we start thinking that maybe you're not worthy enough of to be able to have fun. How do you deal with those emotions?
Yeah, this is a long process of disconnecting money from morality. Like, money is not good or bad. And I do think that some financial educators, they, especially when they want you to get out of debt really fast or something, they want you to get really mad about it or feel guilty about things. And I think that's really unhelpful and ultimately creates bad thought patterns. Is this, I spent money, therefore I'm a bad person? Or if I'm a good person, I deserve to spend in this way. And it's taking the math out of money and it's putting it in the emotional realm. This makes me a good or bad person. And I'm like, you can afford it or you can't. It doesn't make you any sort of person. I just think it's a mistake to connect those two.
So, of all the mindset shifts that you have had in your life, what's been the biggest mindset shift you have had around money?
I think it's definitely about this emotional piece, this whether or not you deserve something and whether or not debt makes you a bad person or being just like this is true or it's not. I can afford, I have money left over in my food budget or I don't. And it doesn't have any bearing on what kind of person I am. And I do see this struggle with other people like, oh, do I deserve this nice dress or something too? But I'm like, why is that the question? Why are we bringing all of this morality into money?
It's one thing to be able to have constraints around buying things that you may not need right away, like a new dress. But when it comes to food, a lot of people feel that they should be able to eat as much as they want, however much as they want, because it relates to health. So, how do we take that guilt, shame, but also put some parameters around what you mentioned is a food budget?
Yeah, that is like about needs versus wants. And this gets really complicated because, like you're saying, we need food, we need to eat, we want to be healthy, but we also want to stay in that budget. So I try to help people get curious about their spending and get in like a detective problem solving mode about how can we only spend $1,000 on food and buy nutritious food and have a little bit left for fun because it just gets muddy like you're saying when we're like I deserve these things. Definitely when I'm thinking about how can I budget for my food but still stay healthy, restaurants are a big one, of course. I put that in a separate budget because I think restaurants are basically entertainment food, not need food. So put that in a separate budget. You've got your $200, $300 that you're going to spend on entertainment food, fun food. And then you have your necessities budget. What do we need to eat? And there's a lot of ways to rein in your food spending without depriving yourself because they say that about 40% of food just goes to waste in the fridge anyway. So you're already throwing away 40% of your food budget. So even if we could cut down on our food waste and just buy the things that we actually need and will eat, you can already save yourself hundreds of dollars in that way without lowering quality or anything like that.
Let's talk about emergency funds. Now, there are a lot of financial experts that talk about having $1,000 as an emergency fund just in case something goes wrong. How much of a priority should one put on an emergency fund? And in 2025's economy, do you think $1,000 is enough?
This is a hot topic debate right here. The $1,000 emergency fund, the idea behind that is it's just keeping you off the edge from going into debt any further. But maybe that was true 30 years ago, but not so much anymore because inflation has just driven the price up of everything. So if anything were to break, like even on your car, it's very unlikely that it would be less than $1,000. This strategy is about having that starter emergency fund so that you can get really serious about paying off debt, but keep yourself from going into any more debt. But I think that the starter emergency fund should be $2,000 at least. And then you intensely pay off your debt. You get rid of that consumer debt as fast as you can. And then you start building that 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And how much that is, I think, should really depend on what your family is like. This isn't a cookie cutter thing. That's the other thing that is really important to me is that not everybody's money situation is the same. So we shouldn't be pretending that it is. Like when you have 4 children and yes, you're trying to pay off your debt, having only $2,000 in the bank, that's pretty dangerous, honestly, because so many people are depending on you. Or if you work for yourself, that is definitely a more vulnerable place, can be a more vulnerable place if you're the only income earner. So you should be thinking about maybe I need 6 month emergency fund, maybe I need 12-month emergency fund, and not just making your decisions off some sort of cookie cutter. This is how life goes. Be like, okay, what are the things that could happen? What could those cost?
Investing is something that we all know we need to do, but we never get around to it. And part of the reason is because we all feel that we have very little money to start investing. Because the balance between paying off debt and having an emergency fund and then investing just takes the backseat. So, how do you recommend people start investing if they have very little money?
My recommendation is just start. That's almost the hardest part, honestly, is you need to start. So start with $50. I bet you have $50. And then I really encourage people to set up automatic investing so that it just happens because it's not unusual for us to get to the end of the month and feel like we have nothing left. It's I'll get to investing after I have everything covered. But if you don't do it first, it's just not going to happen. I would definitely encourage people to take advantage of their employer match with their 401k first. Because I know some people are like, stop investing until you pay off all your debt. I'm like, what if you have $100,000 of student loans and it's going to take you years and years to pay that off? And you're going to miss out on 10 years of growth in the market. So, yeah. So that first step is you need to just set something up and then set something up ridiculously low so that you can just get used to the habit of investing, if that makes sense.
So, if I'm listening to this and I have never invested, I'm in my 30s, I know things are getting late, I have a couple $100 to invest, perhaps. Where is the first place you would recommend I go and get started?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, if you have an employer with a 401k match, I would start there and do that until you reach the match. So if they contribute 100% up to $4,000, let's say, you want to do that until you get to $4,000 a year because that's 100% return on your money. And that is amazing just to begin with. So if your employer doesn't have like that, and also if you work for a small company, like my husband, they don't necessarily have those sorts of things. So then I would start with a Roth IRA. And you can set one of these up yourself, or you can go to a financial advisor and they will do it for you and they'll help you manage it also. But you can go to Charles Schwab or Fidelity, set a Roth IRA up yourself, and then set up those automatic investings.
Are there limits to how much money one can have through Roth IRAs?
Yes, that there are. So I think it just went up to 7 grand a year. If you're just starting to invest and you're like, I've got a couple $100, don't worry about it. You won't get there right now. If you start later, you can do catch up payments and stuff on those. And so that you can contribute more if you're interested in doing that. Yeah. But the 401ks definitely have higher limits. But the thing about 401ks is that you're going to have to pay taxes at retirement. And with the Roth IRA, the reason that it's the most wonderful account in the world, in my opinion, is that you're not paying taxes at retirement or on any of the growth that you've had. So your money goes a lot farther. So you're putting after tax money in that. I know I'm throwing around a lot of terms, but so you already paid taxes on your $100. You put it in your Roth IRA. And then when it grows to $200 at retirement, you can just take it out and you don't have to pay any taxes at that point. But the stuff in your 401k, you do have to pay taxes on, and that can be painful.
Is there a certain income limit that restricts the Roth IRA participation, or can anybody, regardless of their income, participate in it?
There is a limit, but you can get creative about that. And you can do like a backdoor Roth IRA. There's lots of different strategies. So if that's you, talk to your financial advisor and talk about how you can do those slightly trickier moves, but you can get the same sort of advantages with that.
What would you recommend one does after they've invested in their 401k Roth IRA?
So if you've maxed out your 401k and your Roth IRA, really it's up to you. But you could go like a traditional brokerage account, or maybe you are interested in investing in real estate because that has some tax advantages too. And then you can invest in the same sorts of things in a traditional brokerage account that you can with your Roth IRA or your 401k.
What drew you to real estate as part of your financial strategy?
I love buying real estate. There's a lot of excitement about it. And I think, and it's really cool to say, look, I have these many doors. And also the cash flow is cool, is every month you can see that money. And in a way, it's like buying dividend stocks because those are paying out every month. And real estate is definitely a mixed bag from like the landlord perspective in a way, because there's a lot of human factors. So when we started, the way that we started is we lived in one house, we bought a house, and then we saved a new down payment. And then we just moved and we kept our old house. And so I think this is the one of the least expensive ways to get into real estate, which is a really great strategy. Even though if I could go back, what I would do first is I would buy a duplex and then save for a new down payment and move to another duplex. Because some of the things that we've run into a little bit is like the size of the rental and then all this dealing with tenants and stuff. It can get messy and repairs can get super expensive. Definitely, you have to decide if it's your cup of tea because it's not for everybody.
So, if I am considering getting into real estate, would buying a duplex be the first piece of advice you give me, or is there any other advice you would like to give someone who's buying their first rental property?
So if you just want to get into real estate in general, you can buy a REIT, which is where it's just like a stock that's based off real estate. So you can take part in the real estate growth without doing the landlording stuff. But if you want to buy physical real estate and own that yourself, and you don't want to go in with other people, because that was another thing we didn't necessarily want to do, is we didn't want things to get messy with like going in with our friends, or and that's a way to raise capital and get more money. Yeah, I would start with a duplex. I would buy a duplex. They aren't necessarily that much more expensive than a single family home. And then you live in half of it and you get an owner occupied loan, which can often be as low as 3.5%, which is pretty cool. And then you have to follow all the rules. And so don't take my word for it right now about everything. But you move in so that you are occupying the space, you're renting out the other half, which means you're offsetting a bunch of your mortgage already. Maybe you're fixing it up, you're making one half nicer. Maybe you move to the other half, you make that half nicer. And then you save up for your next down payment and you move to the new duplex. And now you have three doors, you have three units, which is pretty cool. And then the only issue with this is what's your family situation, honestly, because I have three kids now. So it's not quite as easy to pick up and move to some random place that was a great real estate opportunity. That makes sense.
What's the biggest misconception people have about building wealth?
Probably that you need to be special to do it, or you need some special skills or knowledge. that the rich people are hiding from you. And part of the reason that I do all my work on YouTube is that I don't want this information to be behind locked doors or for special people, or really the landscape of investing has changed so much because of the pension system going out, basically. And so now we all have to be our own investors. And so since we're close to the first generation that this is happening to, we're like, oh no, we don't know what we're doing. And those people that were managing the pensions, those are professionals. We can't possibly have success in that way. And it's really a time game and it's really a consistency game. But people think they need to get a finance degree or know how to use a spreadsheet or stuff like that to even think about getting started.
How has being a youth changed your career and financial opportunities
Like for me personally, or like for other people.
for you?
It's definitely gotten me to meet a lot of cool people and talk with them, or I've gotten to collab with some people. It also brings opportunities for sponsorships and stuff. And it also, the more you talk about money, I think the more that you learn. I have learned so much doing YouTube itself. In a way, that has helped me because you can go back and look at my old YouTube stuff. And I was such a different person back then from who I am now and the things that I know. And so for me to serve my audience and help them learn about money, I am also learning about money and doing more research and knowing more things and knowing about what's going on in the world. And that has just raised my awareness too.
What's the biggest lesson you have learned about building an audience online?
Probably that it's a lot of hard work. I also think that it's a lot about, I always thought that, of course, my audience would grow if I had the right knowledge, if I knew my stuff. And that's not necessarily the skill set. It's about how am I presenting it to people in a way that helps them. Because I know lots of people, they know all the things, they're very well researched, but they're not doing the thing that it would take to reach the people that need them. So I really want to do the things that are necessary for me to reach the people that need me and not just keep my knowledge to myself and be like, yes, I do know all these things. So I guess I always thought like maybe I don't know enough to succeed on YouTube or something, but that's not the problem. It's about how I'm presenting.
A lot of people, when they're starting a channel, making themselves public, they deal with a lot of imposter syndrome. So, how do you handle imposter syndrome if it ever comes up?
Of course it comes up. Any creator would be lying if they told you that they never had those feelings. I think it's really helpful to like think beyond myself in a way. Who, if I want to be useful, I need to move beyond that feeling of I'm not good enough. And also it helps. YouTube is it's giving you some feedback and you get comments and you are talking to your friends about this stuff. And that kind of gives you some feedback about whether or not you do know things. They're like, where should I start investing in? I'm like, I actually can give you an answer to that. And that kind of builds that confidence a little bit. And also, as you're seeing people react to your content or being like, oh, I never thought of that way, or thank you for making this video so that I could understand this concept. I think that helps a little bit too.
The phrase financial freedom means different things to different people. How do you define financial freedom personally?
Yeah, so I think this term really gets confused with financial independence. So I would put financial independence is this idea of my assets can generate enough revenue to support my lifestyle. So if you spend 60 grand a year, your investments pay out 60 grand a year. So that's that financial independence. So financial freedom, what does that mean? I think that's a lot looser. And I don't want to be super vague, but it can mean different things to different people. I would say there's more like levels. You should think about it as levels. Like, what's your level of financial freedom? One level of financial freedom could be I have my own place, I'm paying my own bills, I'm supporting myself fully with my own job. I am financially a unit on my own. It could also be I'm choosing, or another level up could be like I have paid off my consumer debt. So like student loans, car loans. I'm supporting my lifestyle and I have leftover money to go on vacation. If that kind of makes sense. I think it's the confusion between those two terms that kind of gets people confused.
How do you go about setting financial goals for yourself each year? Any rituals or practices?
So if you're in some sort of relationship, you should be thinking about doing this with your partner. And what we try to do is do a dream session. And the reason I call it a dream session is that I want us to think bigger because people really limit themselves about what they want to do and what's possible because they have adult syndrome. Because, when we become an adult, we have to start being responsible and paying our bills, and we stop dreaming and wondering what's possible. And so I think it's important to have this dream session and be like, if you could do anything, if you could go anywhere, and then we figure out how to make some of these dreams happen. And it's so interesting how this changes so much year to year, honestly, because if you had asked me 5 years ago what my dreams were, it would look totally different than now. And that's why it's so important to check in and stay flexible about what's happening.
If you could teach one financial concept on a giant billboard, what would it say?
Part of me wants to say it would be like, take the next step because people need to take one small step forward, an actual action, not a dream, not a thought. They need to take one small action at a time. I'm not exactly sure how you'd phrase that, but I think that's a lot of what holds people back. They feel like they need to take 100 steps at a time, and then they're like, forget it. Like I was saying, if we could track all of our expenses and that's the only thing we did, that would be a huge step forward. Or if we could set up a retirement account and put $50 in it, that would also be a huge step forward. I think people just overcomplicate it and be like, I need to go take 50 finance classes before I even think about investing. And then they never do it. They never take the action. And the action is the most important part.
What's the worst piece of financial advice you've ever heard?
That is a good one. It would probably be something like you need to ask yourself if you deserve something, or about looking within yourself and seeing if you're worthy of whatever you're buying. Because, like I was saying, that connecting those emotions, it just makes everything really messy. Whatever makes you feel guilty about being a human that needs something. Or I also see people talking about you should never go into debt for college. And I think that can be very harmful because college is, you can't always go to college in the same way. You won't always be an age where you can go into college, and there's value in finishing your degree in a set amount of time so that you can move on and get that raise and make more money instead of taking 10 years to get your degree and working at McDonald's so that you can graduate debt free. I think that's pretty bad advice, honestly.
What is one book that has changed your financial journey that you would like to recommend?
I do love to read, so there's a lot of them, but I'd probably say The Millionaire Next Door. That was a big eye opener for me, just about what's possible, in that there are more millionaires than you think, and they didn't do as many special things as you think. Just that whole bringing money into reality and not like you need special skills. Be like, they totally did it. They made a few different choices than us. Maybe their car is 10 years old, but they were focusing on what really mattered and building true wealth. They did it, and they live next door. It's not some magical far away Beverly Hills wealth thing.
If you could go back to the 18-year-old self, what financial advice would you give yourself?
I definitely say buy a duplex first. And I would say don't waste your time feeling guilty about money. And also enjoy your life now. I think there's a lot of panic in me about saving or how I spent money. We need to save all this like frantic savings and paying off debt, almost like anxiety driven in a way. And I'd just be like, enjoy life now, still pay off your debt, but don't be so stressed about it. Even though that's pretty much my whole advice to myself ever. Don't be so stressed.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Lena. Where can people find you?
Find me on YouTube. You can just look up on my name. So it's Laina Brown. Laina spelled Laina. And you can also find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and I also have a Facebook group. So you can find me there also.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Lena. It was good talking to you. Hope to talk to you soon again.
Thank you so much for having me.